Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I'm getting to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our community. What did they do to get started and what are they doing to stay there? And well, you are in for a treat because we are celebrating the 75th episode. And I have a special guest. His name is Adam Waller. He is the talent acquisition consultant at Bank of America, and he's also my son. Hey, Adam, how you doing, man?
Hey, doing good. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on. What do they say? Long time listener, first time guest.
75 episodes. Listen, I couldn't think anyone better to have on the show than you. And I'm so glad you're here today because I definitely want to talk about leadership. I want to talk about seeing things through like a young professional's lens. And of course, I've known you since you were born. So I know a lot about you, but I want to share. I want to share some things about you and what you're doing. But before we get started, I would love for you if you could just share just a little bit about Bank of America. I know a lot of us probably know who Bank of America is, but what do you do and who do you support?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a talent acquisition consultant at Bank of America. You know, obviously working supporting our corporate office. Specifically, I'm helping out our chief data office organization. So that's going to be, in our global technical operations side, working with the hiring managers, helping them to have best hiring practices and bring best talent onto their teams.
Man, listen, I'm excited to dive into this interview because we're also going to talk about talent acquisition, recruiting in the workplace, and a whole lot more. And by the way, now, of course, your grandma Marty was episode 36, I believe, the end of season 1. And then your sister, special episode 50, Allison Resentes. And so, again, I'm glad to have you on the show. Hey, let's start the show off. For those who don't know the Adam Waller story, I would love for you to share, where did you grow up and how in the world did you get into talent acquisition and leadership?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm sure everybody knows your story, so I'll kind of, start there. Born in Oklahoma, moved here. My family, took kind of a big risk. My dad took a job here in the Dallas area. So moved here, I think in 94, was it summer of 94, summer of 93? So I kind of consider myself as growing up, here in the Dallas area, even though I was, born in Oklahoma. Went to high school in Dallas, finished up college at University of North Texas in Denton. And that's kind of, where my, finding my lane started, right? I've been in a ton of different lanes. Started out working in healthcare when I got my first job out of college. I'm trying to think back of what I was even doing at that point. It was home healthcare. It was a sales job. So, just trying to kind of figure out what is going to work for me. What am I interested in doing? From there, moved to a technical position, working at Microsoft, kind of stayed in the technical space for a while. Realized I enjoyed technology, but, if you are not super passionate about technology, things are changing every week, sometimes daily, and you got to stay up to date on that. So, I realized that probably wasn't my field. Moved over into an agency recruiting posture and worked there for about 5 years. Really enjoyed it. Got to the end of my 5-year period and kind of was thinking, what's next for me? What could be the next move to kind of position myself for growth, and decided to kind of dip my toe into the corporate waters, joined Bank of America back in 2019 and going on about 2 years now here at the bank.
I was thinking back to where, you had talked about starting in home healthcare sales and even back in college. And I was just wondering, when you were going to college, did you even have an idea of what you were going to do? I mean, when you're trying to, find your lane, right? Find that major. Did you have an idea at that time? I remember you've always, you've always worked high school and college, but did you ever have any idea at that time?
I didn't. I think in the 11th hour, I decided on my major, and if I'm being honest with you and kind of the audience, I really just looked at how many classes I had gotten credit for and what was going to be the fastest route for me to get that degree. I think college is super important, obviously for different classes that you're taking, preparing for the role you're going into, but maybe even more than that is just learning how to communicate with people, how to hold yourself accountable to get up and go to classes, how to take notes, how to set up schedules for yourself. So a lot of those just daily skills that you're needing to build just to move out of your parents' house and live on your own. I think sometimes is even more important than the specific material that you're learning. But to go back to your question, I think I still maybe am not entirely sure, what my path is. I just try to always be looking for the next step. And that seems to be working pretty well for me so far. Just kind of always thinking about, okay, what's next for me? How can I continue to grow? And then just trying to be as fluid as possible.
I love that. And by the way, yes, honesty is the best practice. I love that you shared that. I mean, that's a lot of vulnerability, when we share things like that. And I was the same way. And I've shared that, I remember getting out of college and thinking, okay, I'm ready, but I really didn't know what I was ready for. I got my management degree. My brother had got his management degree, and I was just ready to manage. I just didn't know what that looked like. And the reason why I brought that up is because I went through a few different jobs, if you will, to find my lane. And then, one day we were having a conversation and you had many, many, many jobs before you actually found what you really enjoy. And I just want people to hear that, like your sister was on episode 50 and she pretty much knew what she wanted to do from day one. So some people, everybody has a different way, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, those people who know what they want to do from day one, they're blessed, right? Allison, my sister, your daughter, she knew what she wanted to do. My wife is a doctor. She knew since she was in middle school that that's what she wanted to do. And provides those types of people with a goal, right, to strive to and a clear path. And but I think for the majority of people, maybe it's a little bit more ambiguous, a little less clear, and sometimes that can be a little scary, not knowing what you want to do. So I think, kind of like I mentioned, as long as you are just thinking about it, right, what are some options for me? I've kind of found that maybe I'm not as I haven't had as much luck finding what I want to do, but I can definitely identify what I don't want to do, right? And so you take on a position, you're like, okay, well, I like these aspects of the role, but these parts, not as much. So for my next step, how can I focus on these areas that I'm enjoying and that I feel like I can provide value? And in the end, I think that's all you can do is just find out how you can position yourself as best as you can for professional success, but then also personally to be able to find a rewarding path for yourself.
I was actually thinking about how, going through the process, that has probably helped you quite a bit when it comes to recruiting talent, because you're probably talking to a lot of different people that they're just not sure. And you're able to share your experiences and help them, just give them insight, to whether, hey, is that job going to work for them? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. I would. I would say maybe it's even more on the working with the hiring manager's side. Where I'm at in the chief data office, a lot of these candidates are a little bit more senior, very technical. They have these certifications. They know what they want to be doing. But we have some positions where the hiring manager may say, this is a candidate that doesn't quite have the years of experience I'm looking for, but they have a great mindset. They have a great base. I really like what they've been doing. But maybe they're just hesitant, that they're not quite where they want to be. And that's a great instance where, you can talk to those managers about, hey, this is someone that you're bringing on for their potential, maybe not hiring them for where they're at right now, but where they could be in 2 years, right? So, yeah, I mean, those are great messages to be able to deliver with hiring managers, and going through that personally, I can definitely, tell some stories there to make it, relate a little bit more with them.
I love that. I didn't even think about that side. Even more important with the hiring manager, being able to just kind of share perspective. I love that, man. Hey, thanks for sharing that. I want to talk about leadership in 2021. I mean, obviously you're leading. I'm just wondering, what do you enjoy most about leadership?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite part of leadership is, I like being able to be a subject matter expert. I enjoy my teammates being able to come to me and leverage me for information that they might need. I was in a management role for about 5 years before moving to the bank, and this is kind of touching on what I talked about before. Some of the day-to-day management tasks, some of the holding your salespeople responsible, some of those tough conversations. Maybe I didn't enjoy as much as the leading by example piece. Being that subject matter expert, kind of being an example for what are some good practices, right, for your team to follow. And so that's the piece that I enjoyed. So when I came over to the bank, I did move into a managerial spot, but I made sure that there were going to be opportunities for, those leadership spots, putting yourself there where you can be someone that the team can leverage. So leadership in 2021, I think is going to be really important to people. Just need to be flexible. Obviously with everything that's been going on, in 2020 and 2021 and who knows into the future, I think it's really important to focus on, how your team is doing, not just, professionally, but, personally. Obviously you don't want to, to delve too much or ask, questions that may cause people to be uncomfortable, but I think you always want to make sure that, what are the current, important driving factors for your team for a couple of reasons. One, so that what's going on with them and just have a good feel of their bandwidth and what you can put on them, at that time. But also knowing what motivates them. I mean, if you know what someone's driving factor is, when you're having conversations, you can always tie it back to that. This is important. Why is it important specifically for you? Because of this. I think 2021, just as much as any other year, just really want to focus on making sure that your employees have their mentals right, as Marshawn Lynch might say.
I love that, Marshawn Lynch. Hey, I was thinking when you said that, I've had Holly Novak on, the president of Dallas HR. She's HR of operations for Jack Henry, and I've had Melissa Creo on, Chief Human Resource Officer. They both said the same thing. They said it's about check-ins, right? It's about leaning in and starting off the conversation with, "Hey, how are you doing?" Not "Where is my project?" or "What where's the initiatives or the that you're delivering," or whatever. It's about first finding out about the person, and then you mentioned about what motivates them. I just absolutely love that, which leads me to think, someone, so you're a young professional. I would consider you a young professional in the workplace. And I always like to ask this question. I like to ask the question about how leaders develop influence in the workplace, but I'm even more in particular interested because you are a young professional, right? And so you, obviously you've been in the organization for a little bit of time, but how do you develop influence in the workplace?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there are several ways to do that. You can, I think it's important to find out what works for you. What is something that drives you? What's something that you enjoy doing? So maybe for some people that is, public speaking, maybe that's, doing trainings. For some people, maybe it's more of a passive role where you just, like I said, that SME where you're kind of a well of knowledge and people can, come to leverage you if they have any questions. I think what's most important is putting yourself out there, finding different opportunities where you feel that you can contribute or grow yourself. So, maybe that isn't necessarily taking on some big project. Maybe that is you're putting together a PowerPoint for your team. Maybe your boss is asking someone to raise their hand to assist, and you're doing a bunch of these little things. Team members see that, management sees that. You're someone that's competent, that has knowledge, and you're starting to build your credibility amongst your teammates. When I was in my sales role at the agency, they always talked about building your personal brand, right? So you have your company brand, and then you have your personal brand, and you're always building that and always in control of that. When you're talking with your clients, whether those are clients outside of the company, or if those clients are the employees and managers that you work with, you're always kind of building that personal brand. And so I think keeping that at front of mind is good for your growth.
I love that you shared that personal brand. What I got out of that is yes, raising your hand. That is definitely a first start. And what's interesting about that is that's not anything big. It's
Right.
little, but sometimes those lead to the big moments. But it's those little things over time. So what you're saying is influence isn't developed in a day, it's developed daily.
That's right. Yeah. They say winning isn't a sometimes thing, it's an all the time thing. So yeah, it's just you got to stack those bricks.
Well, you also talked about growing, and you talked about just continuing to become more. I heard Jim Rohn once say, "If you want more, you have to become more." Right. And so I'm curious, like, what do you do for growth?
I think that there's twofold, right? I think you have your personal growth, and that takes a lot of introspection and kind of taking a personal inventory of current day, how are things going? What is important to you? How are you currently positioned? Where do you want to be? And then doing that gap analysis there. Okay, so what is it going to take for me to get from where I'm at day one now to a year from now, 5 years from now, and trying to kind of, whether you write it down or just mentally, you want to be able to visualize your success, right? Visualize, how you're going to get to where you want to be. So I think that's really important. And then I think it's also important to have, leaders, whether it be maybe a mentor or a boss or whatever it may be in your professional career that can help to provide, an outside perspective of where you're at, highlighting your strengths, highlighting your weaknesses, and maybe giving their opinion on, hey, here's some areas where I think that you could really succeed, or here's some areas where you could improve. You may find out that, obviously you could find out there's some areas where you thought you were stronger that you're not as strong, but I think a lot of people are surprised that they have strengths pointed out by leadership that they didn't really realize was a strength for them. And now it's opened up these new doors or a new lane that they could swerve into.
Man, I love that. I had Jimmy Richards. He's the global talent acquisition manager on for Interstate Batteries. And he talked about one time how he had a mentor that he asked him to go out to lunch. And he said, "Hey, I just want to, try to assess, how am I doing, and where do I, how do I need to get the next step?" And the mentor said, "You're a home run hitter." And he's like, "Yes." He said, "But you need to learn how to bunt. You need to learn how to sacrifice. You need to learn how to play the field." And basically what he was saying is you need to get some experience in a lot of different areas. When I need that one big project, you're always there, but it's going to take a little bit. And I just love that. So with you saying that, it makes me want to kind of segue into, have you had some mentors that have helped you get to where you are today? And if you have, I would love for you to share, what was it about them that made them great mentors?
I've been lucky enough to have a lot of different people in my life that I've been able to, kind of leverage, at different points in my life. I think everybody needs something a little different at different points, right? Not to give more promotion to the podcast, but, my dad's been a great mentor for me, taking a big risk to move our family here from a place that, we were pretty comfortable, but looking at kind of that future growth. At the time, not realizing, what all that entailed, how kind of scary, that might have been, looking back on that, definitely is, admirable. I'm lucky that all four of my grandparents are still with us. Each one of them has a story where, you can look and really, find things to emulate, in your current life. I had a boss when I worked, in my previous agency, who was great. I mean, she had a different approach for each person on her team. Her name was Michelle Knox, or is Michelle Knox. I think her best tool as a manager was she could really identify, what I was talking about before, finding out what the driving factor is, for each of her employees, and then catering her approach differently to each one of them. Knowing what they responded to. Some people, you hear about love language, but some people love the, words of affirmation. Some people, like gifts of service. So just figuring out, what are the things that motivate these people, and how can I tie, these messages and principles, how can I convey them to each of these people to where they'll understand, or to where they can tie into a driving factor for them. I think she would talk about peeling back the onion, right? Trying to trying to ask questions and just figure out, how, what is the, almost a little bit of psychology. Why are you doing this? What is it ultimately going to bring you? And then, tying back to that, whether that's financial, whether it's, just looking for accolades, that I really responded well to that. And I think that's something that I'm going to take with me, in the future, wherever I go.
Man, I love that. I love, that's great advice from, you said Michelle Knox. What's the driving factor? So even today, as you take that with you, you talked earlier about checking in. I guess that's one way you do that, right? You find out what motivates that person and try to figure out how can you support that area, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And checking in does a ton of you can get a ton of benefits from that. Obviously, if something, is going on in an employee's personal life, you want to be there for them. But even if nothing but good things are going on, how can the employee replicate those? How can they keep the good vibes going, right? How can they continue the success that they're having? And so then whenever you're having maybe even tough conversations, with your employees, tie those to good things, right? I'm having this conversation with you because I want you to be able to buy that house that you've been talking about, or, I know that you're looking to plan a family and you're looking to maybe get a little bit of remote flexibility. And so, doing some of these things can allow you to have that, just always making it, personalized and kind of showing them the why behind the what.
I love that. That is absolutely fantastic. Great examples. Hey, let me ask you a question. And I always like to ask this for someone that's worked on both sides, on the vendor side and on the corporate side. Did you notice any differences between working on the agency side of staffing and now you are on the corporate side? Anything you notice that stands out?
Well, obviously, working in an agency environment versus a banking corporate environment like Bank of America, just the internal processes, are drastically different. We have a lot of compliance focus, at Bank of America. Obviously that as well, but just a little bit different there, going into the corporate world. I'd say it's actually a lot more similar than I anticipated it being. In my previous role, I was supporting external clients. So clients at other companies, reaching out, doing outreach, identifying their needs, tying that back to a solution that we provide, and then trying to close that deal and make that work. And what I found working corporate is you're doing the same thing, just those external clients. Now they're your colleagues. Now they're the hiring managers you're working with. They're the HR managers. And so you're reaching out, you're really trying to identify, what are your pain points? What keeps you up at night? What are you worried about, regarding their talent acquisition approach, and then figuring out how can we address that and how can we set them up for success to kind of squash some of those demons there.
Yeah, that's great. Great perspective. Hey, I want to ask you a question from a young professional's perspective, and that's around social media. And obviously you're in talent acquisition. You have a LinkedIn profile. And so how important is social media from both a hiring perspective as well as even the candidate? How important is that?
I think obviously it's gonna be different, for different positions that you're interested in. If you are, in the creative space, looking to, work at an agency, a brand ambassador, something like that, they're gonna want to see that social media presence. They're gonna want to see those connections that you're having, those the interactions with all the people in your social media. But some roles it's going to be less important. I think it's all about, how I mentioned before, building your brand. That's part of it. Your LinkedIn. A lot of times people will go to someone's LinkedIn just to get a picture of what that person looks like. Maybe you have a call with someone and you want to just get a little bit of information on them. You're not putting a lot of weight into that LinkedIn, but maybe that's your first encounter with them before speaking with them. So you always want to be able to position yourself as best as possible, put yourself, give yourself the best first step, with a lot of these engagements. And so, part of that is setting up that LinkedIn, setting up your Twitter, whatever it may be, just to, give yourself kind of that professional head start there.
Yeah, it's like your LinkedIn. You talked about LinkedIn as one social media site, and that is definitely a electronic resume, electronic business card. People are always looking at that just to kind of get an insight on where they can go with the conversation. So no, that's great. Hey, I want to just ask you another question around recruiting. And that is, we have a lot of people in the HR community that are listeners of this podcast. And some of them may be looking for their next. And so I always like to ask someone that is on the talent acquisition side, what are some things that people should think about as they're trying to find that next role? Whether it be their, any insight on something you might look for in a resume, or something that they can, you talked about growth, something they can be doing to continue to grow, to be ready and put themselves in position. Any thoughts around that?
First on the resume piece, see a ton of resumes that, I think, the different talent acquisition or HR people that you talk to are probably going to have different opinions. I don't put too much stock, on a resume. It's kind of a sweet science, different managers look for one thing and others look for another. So I try not to be too tough on resumes, because a lot of the times you're not hiring a professional resume writer, right? You're hiring a software engineer or whatever it may be. That being said, some managers don't have that view. So I would say a couple best practices. Keep your resume to 1 to 2 pages. Try to keep it succinct. Try to avoid generic job summaries. So if you're listing a position, what specifically did you do? Do you have an ROI that you can list on the resume? While at this company or while on this project, I contributed to to this rollout, and it helped save the company X amount of dollars, or I tested this amount of cases, or I helped to onboard this amount of candidates in my previous role. Just any kind of tangible information that you can include there. Obviously, if you're trying to get into a sales role, you want to include that sales data there. And then just for the overall search, my approach was always to be a volume shooter when it came to looking for roles. I tried not to exclude too many positions based off of the job description. If I was really looking to find something new but wasn't sure, if something looked interesting or something that I would like to know more about, and I felt like I was minimally qualified, I went ahead and applied to the position. I kind of feel worst case scenario, worst case is you get passed, but let's say you get selected for an interview, you interview for the role, it just isn't a fit for you. I mean, that's easy. You then know that it's not a fit, and you just got one interview in where you kind of practice, answering some of those questions and talking to your resume. So I definitely think putting yourself out there is very important. Don't be too cautious or picky choosy when looking at roles. Really put yourself out there, get an idea. I mean, you never know. I talk to candidates all the time. They're not a fit for the role that they applied for, or they're not interested after talking about it a little bit more. But hey, we actually have this other position that isn't even posted, and you're a great fit for it. Let me get you in the loop with that person. So you never know. I mean, you're always, like I said, building your brand, always talking to talk to as many hiring managers as you can. You never know who they know or what they know. So put yourself out there as much as you can. That's the biggest piece of advice I would give to anyone looking for a role.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I know that some of the stuff you've shared today is going to help some of our listeners out there. Hey, that reminds me of Brian Yanis. He's the upcoming HR conference, HR Southwest conference director. He had mentioned that he was asked to apply for a job. I think he was at JCPenney at the time. And he basically said, he's not going to do it. It's like 60 miles away. And he talked to a couple of different people, and they basically encouraged him to take it. And he ended up loving that job. And Jennifer Swisher, the chief human resource officer, also said the same thing. She went in for a job. They said, hey, we don't really have this, but would you consider this? So I think what you're saying too is, hey, be open and be flexible. You said that early on.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have my own story there. When I started at the agency that I worked at before Bank of America, I actually applied to a recruiter position. Went in and interviewed, and they said, "Hey, we actually feel like you'd be a lot better suited for this sales position that we have." And I would have never applied to a sales position at that time. I'd only heard horror stories, right? Getting in a call center, no one likes you. But I ended up, they talked me into it, and that's just something I would have never even looked at, had I not gone in and done that interview, and they thought I was better, so that's just a case where you never know what's going to happen, and until you put yourself out there and make that introduction, you're not going to find out what happened. So you just, try to do as many interviews as possible, and something's good is going to happen there for sure.
Man, I love that. I love that story and how you were willing to take a chance because what? Hey, it doesn't work out. You try something different. And I think a lot of times we get, I think you talked earlier about being comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? I mean, we get in that comfort zone. And as soon as we step out, it feels a little uncomfortable. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, I didn't even know this was here. Just taking that chance. I want to just ask you real quick. I want to just ask you about failure. And because that's one of those things that I think a lot of people, they're comfortable. And if they want to do something different, but they just, hey, if it doesn't work out, then what do I do? You've had many, many, many jobs. Have you ever, talk about failure. How important is that? And how have you handled that as a young professional?
Everybody deals with that, right, in their own way. Everybody's situation is different. So, putting yourself out there for one person might look different for somebody else. How I've dealt with failure, and I didn't really realize at first that this is how I was dealing with it until I kind of look back several years later. But I talked about this earlier too. I think not necessarily knowing what I want to do in future positions, but in taking roles and leaving them for whatever reason to go to something else, I was able to find out, here's what I didn't like, about where I was, and here's what I did. So, I think something really important is doing a personal inventory, after, some of these instances of, failure, trying to glean the positives from it, and then how do we build on that, and then how do we identify where this failure occurred, or this negativity, and then how can we try to avoid that moving forward. So life goes on, tomorrow's going to come, each next day is going to come. So all you can really do is not dwell on the failure, but just try to, if you can take one thing from it, moving forward, that's just going to help you, because you're going to fail a lot of times in your life. And so, it's that compound effect we talked about, after, 30 failures, now you've got those 30 positive things that, now you don't even really think about the failure. So I know that's tough, in the moment, but once enough time has passed, if you can look back, try to figure out, hey, what was really going on, in this time, and how can I grow from it?
Yeah, I personally have a love-hate relationship with failure. I hate it at the time, but I love it because I know that I'm going to learn from it, and that really is how we learn. So I appreciate you sharing that. I know there's somebody out there that's going to help. Hey, I know that we've been talking about leadership. You obviously lead in your organization. Talk about leading Adam. And I always like to just ask, is there something that you do every day? Like, do you have a daily practice that you do every day that helps keep you on track?
Yeah, I'd say during the work week, for sure. Weekends are a little bit more hit and miss, depending on how active they are. But, one thing that I like to do, and I picked this up in my previous sales job, sometimes there's just so much going on that, your brain can feel a little cluttered, and you almost get kind of frozen because you have so many things to do. You don't know where to start. And so you feel like you're not being productive. So one thing that I would, I always do is I block off the first 30 minutes of my day. So whether I, maybe I'll get in early and I can get that time back, or, whatever, but I block off the first 30 minutes of every day. And I do a brain dump of, everything I can think of that I need to do for the day, write that down. And then try to, prioritize that list, as best as possible regarding these are the things that have to get done today. These are the things that need to get done by the end of the week. And so, ideally what I do is come in on Monday, do a brain dump for the week, try to triage those to what can be done today and then what we can do later on in the week. And then daily kind of, come back to that. Hey, where are we at? Okay, what do we need to get done? What do we need to add to the list? I think a lot of people will find that they'll get to the end of a day or sometimes even a week and maybe they haven't done a single thing on their list just because so much has come up. But now you just know that you didn't lose that list. Now you can take that into the next week. I think what gives people some of these intense moments of anxiety is when they have so much stuff to do and then all of a sudden something unexpected has come up. And so they got to put those things on the back burner. And now, some of those things might be forgotten or maybe don't get the attention that they need. So I think, you need to be easy on yourself, right? Nobody's a superhero. Most people don't have, Mensa level memory. It's okay to write it down. I mean, it's okay to write your math out, right? You don't have to do it all mentally. And that just is it seems something that's very simple, but it's made a drastic difference in just how I feel about my day, how prepared I feel, and really affects my confidence just knowing, I feel so in control that I have these written down and nothing feels better than crossing an item off the list, once you finished it.
I love that. I sometimes I'll share in a presentation. People are sometimes they love lists so much that they do something and they realize, hey, I didn't have that on my list, and they'll actually write it down just to cross it off. It feels good. You ever done?
I do the exact same thing. Yeah, I'll finish something and think, well, I'm not getting the credit I deserve because it's not on this list. So yeah, write it down, cross it off. I mean, absolutely, definitely do that. That's something you want to get credit, give yourself credit for that.
Yeah, sure. I love that. How you said, we have to give ourselves grace, especially during this time with whether you're working in the office or remote work. It's just heavy. It's heavy. Yeah. And just do the best you can. I love that. Hey, I always like to ask guests, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about. I mean, you've shared some incredible tips and strategies and advice today. Have you ever received any advice, like from, I don't know, maybe growing up, or something you received from a colleague? It was just so good. You find yourself sharing that often?
Yeah, there's so many. I feel now that on the spot, can't think of a lot of those. One that I can't think of, I think I mentioned it. Is the peeling back the onion. And so, when you're addressing, an issue, or let's say you're working with a teammate, let's say you're a manager and working with someone and their performance isn't quite where you want it to be, but it's a great employee. They're trying, they're putting in the time. You're just not necessarily seeing the results. And you're not entirely sure why. So, one thing I was taught was, you sit down with them and go through it. Okay. So and you kind of walk backwards, what steps, are you taking, where's the gap? Right. And so, if you're following all the steps that you should be performing well. But if you're not, there's obviously a gap there somewhere. And so, you don't have to find that right away. And sometimes it's hard to identify, where the miss is with an employee. But if you just, peel back the onion, just go step by step, walk it back and just figure out where the gap is. Typically, you'll find out that there's an area where you can just address it once, and then all of a sudden employee performance is just completely turned around. And it's just a matter of, identifying an area that maybe, neither party was aware, wasn't performing and going from there. So, I think not, it's a teamwork effort. When you're managing, it's on, on the manager and on the employee, to really try to drill down and figure out, what the hang up is. And you don't have to solve those problems in one day or 1 hour. It's an ongoing thing, always.
As you say that, I was thinking about how, sometimes when you have that situation, it can also be just a miscommunication, right? Just like what you're saying is that, hey, I didn't realize that was a problem. Now I do. Like I was always doing it this way, and I thought it was good. Nobody's ever said anything. And now all of a sudden you shared that with me and, oh, okay, well, I'll change. Sometimes it's just about just good communication.
Yeah, for sure. An instance where, previous role, working with a salesperson, their numbers look great. They're making the outbound calls they need to be making. They're meeting with the number of clients they need to be making or meeting with. Let's say they're picking up, orders, but for whatever reason, just the close rate isn't there. Okay, so let's peel that back. Starting from the orders, what do those look like? Right? Are they well vetted? Okay, they maybe they're not as well vetted. Okay, why? Let's go back. So when you're meeting with these clients, what are you talking about? Okay, well, you're kind of misrepresenting this service a little bit. Let's talk about that a little bit more. Let me help to educate you on how to pitch that or how to, what that service really is and how to convey that to the client so that you can level set expectations. A lot of the times it's something small where it's just a misunderstanding. And then once you kind of address it, everyone's like, oh, well, I can't believe this was ever a problem. Then all of a sudden the spigot comes on and success, shortly follows.
That is so fantastic. I love that. That is a great, great example. And I appreciate you sharing that. Man, the time goes by so fast. I've got so many more questions I want to ask you, but I'm going to shift over to it's time to accelerate. And typically, just some fun questions I want to ask you. So I know a little bit. I'm curious. Would you rather read a book or listen to a podcast or something else?
I'm trying to read more books, but I gotta say podcasts. We've been, especially in the times of COVID, been doing some road trips, right? And so I love to find a good podcast, and run through the whole thing, the whole series on a road trip. So I'd say podcast, but I would definitely like to be reading more than I am currently. So maybe that's the goal for me, here in through 2021.
I want to throw some twists in here just because I know you personally. You're also a big fan of The Ticket.
Oh yeah. That's I usually will have that on 24/7 here and in the office. So yeah, that's a little bit of a hybrid between a podcast and listen to the radio. Yeah, love The Ticket, P1 for sure. Still tell people about my fight night years. So yeah, love The Ticket. Always have that on. Absolutely. Now, usually on road trips, the wife might not love The Ticket as much. So then we'll put on a podcast that we can both enjoy. Maybe some kind of something dark, true crime. But yeah, if it's me, The Ticket's going to be on for sure.
Yeah, definitely a shout out to your wife, Alex. True crimes actually is probably, if I were to take a poll of all the podcasts, of all my guests listening to podcasts, True Crimes would definitely be number one.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just that kind of the morbid curiosity, right? Just kind of wanting to from a distance, see what's going on. Absolutely, that doesn't surprise me.
I love that. Hey, let me ask you this. Besides work, what energizes you? Like, what do you like to do that really gives you that energy each day?
Yeah, I love to exercise. For me, it's maybe more of a mental thing than anything else. I feel like I kind of get in the zone when I'm exercising that I almost get too tired to really worry about anything else. And I always feel reset afterwards. So that's important for me. Obviously, it's important to, stay healthy and that's a big piece. But I think just, once again, just going back to just focusing on my mentals, exercise is super important for me. I'm typical guy. I'm like my dad, golf, love doing that. We'll golf. So really like staying active. Here in Texas, it's a little tough to be outside sometimes during the dog days of August and early September, late July, but try to get outside as much as we can and get the blood pumping. That's probably what brings me the most joy, outside of posting up in front of the TV.
Yeah, I'm afraid to keep playing golf with you, man, because you are you're going to be able to smoke me here before long. Hey, let me ask you this. Here we are. We're taping in August. This is going to play end of September, 75th show. What are you personally most excited about last quarter 2021 and then going into 2022? Anything that you in particular you're excited about?
I'm really interested to see what the back office approach will be like, for corporate America. I think over the last year and a half, we've seen, that work can be done remotely, and it can be done well remotely. And some people work a lot better, remotely. That being said, there's just an inherent benefit to, I think, having that energy and that buzz, having people in person, working with each other, bouncing off ideas off each other. They might not normally do through chat, but if you're sitting next to someone. So it's going to be interesting to see how we can strike the balance between, maybe providing some of those work from home opportunities that weren't provided before, but still being able to capitalize on having that in-person connection in offices. And I think that's going to be really hard to strike a good balance. And I don't think you're going to be able to keep everyone happy, whether it be the crowd that wants to stay at home or the crowd that wants to be back in the office. But, that's why some of these executives get paid the big bucks to help, put these plans in place. And I'm excited to see what that looks like, how it pans out. And I think companies that are going to be most successful are those that, can be fluid, that are not afraid to identify, hey, this isn't working. Let's change to this, or, hey, this is working. It's not something we normally did in the past, but, let's not be afraid to embrace it. Really excited to see, how that pans out, what that looks like, obviously finishing out this year, but moving into 2022 and just, seeing, does the marketplace look completely different 2 years from now, or does it look similar to 2019?
Yeah, I think that's interesting that you brought. I'm excited to see that too, and I think it's interesting because I've talked to many leaders, and there's just such a mix there, right? You have one set that says, "Hey, we need to get back into the office." You have the other one that says, "Hey, we need to be all remote," and then you have the one in the middle that says, "Hey, we need to figure out a way to do it both." And I think you use the word fluid, and I think you're going to be like, I think that's right on. It's the companies that can find their lane, right, and can figure out that fluid. Because you're right. At the end of the day, you've heard many people, quote, first step to failure is making everybody happy. You're not going to make everybody happy, but I think there's some ways that companies will figure it out and make it work for everyone. So no, I love that. Hey, let me ask you this. Speaking of that, what are you most grateful for?
I think that's an easy question here in 2021. I mean, I've been blessed to, have my health, here over these last couple of years. I know a lot of people have gone through some tough times, and definitely I have some family members who have been affected, but luckily everybody still with us, just happy for health, kind of just being here, having today, having tomorrow. I think sometimes people feel like maybe that's not necessarily something to be grateful for, but it really is. I mean, having an opportunity to do this thing all over again, tomorrow. I mean, that's a big deal that some people don't have. So I try to, I think maybe one of my faults is sometimes I'm not as grateful. Sometimes I'm moving so fast that I don't stop down to really, ruminate and think about, what I'm thankful for. But that's really been something in 2021 focusing on, and I got to put health at the top of that list. But also, having relationships, with people both professionally, and personally, whether that be family or friends, it's just crucial to be able to leverage, those relationships to just, make sure that you're able to stay healthy, mentally and set yourself up for success.
Yeah, no, I think you're right on. I think I heard Steve Brown once mention that everybody needs at least 5 people outside the workplace just to talk to. And what he was basically talking about was the importance of networking. And I tell people today, networking is more challenging today than ever. But the mission's still the same. You got to figure out ways to connect. And I love that you shared that, because I'm the same way. I'm just grateful for those relationships because it gives you somebody to just share your everyday with. And that's fantastic. Hey, as we wrap up, I have one final question I always like to ask my guests on the show, and that is, Adam, 10 years older. So here you are, you're in your mid 30s. So the mid 40s guy is going to show up at your door, and he's knocking. You're going to go answer that door. What's he going to tell you?
You sent me full disclosure. You sent me a list of, questions to kind of review and try to prep some answers. I really put some thought into this one. And what I tried to do was think, what would I tell myself 10 years back? And that's always a tough question, but I think taking the time to just stop, right? To stop, breathe, maybe have, 10 minutes of quiet time and just kind of reflect on what's going on, what you haven't. And, it's always good to be working on yourself and be building. But, you want to spend time in the present as well. You don't always want to be looking to the future or looking to the past. You want to, it's really hard sometimes hard for me personally to kind of live in the present. But, I think that's just really important, because otherwise you're never taking time to enjoy, the fruits of your labor. You're always thinking about, okay, well, what do I need to do next? Or what didn't I do here? If you're not sitting in that moment, you're kind of just on the wheel, that gerbil wheel, until you kind of keel over. So I would say, trying to spend time to kind of look internally and just enjoy kind of where you're at, and just take some time to be kind to yourself.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. That's fantastic. I love that. As you shared that, I was just thinking about the word presence, and how each year, whenever I do my goal planning, I always like to have a word of the year. And a few years ago, I had the word presence. So no, I appreciate you sharing that, because there's some people right now that are listening that are thinking, I need to be more present, not just in the workplace. I need to be more present at home. I need to be more present in my community, or when I'm going to see family, or whatever that case may be. And the work's going to still be there. But, just taking that time, right? That's fantastic.
For sure. Yeah. And I think the best you can set yourself up mentally, that's going to affect your confidence. That's going to affect your energy, and that's only going to help, your professional life is getting in a good place, personally and mentally. So, also tying back to those check-ins, right? You want to make sure your team is doing well, and making sure that they're taking time to be present.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. You're definitely driving in the leadership lane. I'm so proud of you. If somebody is listening right now and says, hey, you know what, I want to connect with Adam, how's the best way he could connect, or she?
Sure. Yeah. I'm on LinkedIn, first name, last name. Feel free to find me on there. I'm always open to connecting. If anybody has any questions, looking, happy to share resumes with networks. If you want to send me an email, you can do it. Send me first name, last name. So Adam.Waller. At bofa.com. So it's bofa.com. Feel free to shoot me a note. I'm happy to, always happy to connect with anyone, and, continue, fostering new relationships.
Yeah, no, I will put the link in the show notes, so that way for the listeners, if they want to connect. And man, this has been a lot of fun. I'm just curious. I'm just going to throw this out there. As I asked you to interview, what did you think about that? Any stories come to mind?
Yeah, I just thought, wow, an hour. How am I gonna, how am I gonna fill that time? What on earth am I gonna talk about? I think an important thing is, I honestly thought, well, I don't know if I have found my lane. I don't know if I'm in, and thinking about that more and more. Maybe that's the purpose, right? Is constantly looking for that, and was thinking, well, maybe there's some people that are going to be listening who feel the same, and what do they do? So that kind of put me at ease, and but yeah, I was definitely nervous, and like you said, the time flies while you're on here.
I love that. It reminds me, when you saying that, it reminds me of one time when I was going to speak at an event, and I was listening to a podcast. And it was a Brendan Burchard podcast. He was basically talking about, he was getting ready to go on stage, and there was a lady that was going to go in front of him, and he met her backstage, and she said, "Oh, I'm so nervous." And he said, "Oh," he said, what are you nervous about? Well, I'm getting ready to go out and speak to all these people. And he said, oh, okay. Well, have you done this before? And she said, no. And he's like, well, why are you nervous then? You don't even know, what that experience is like, and then, basically the conversation really got to, when you focus on the audience, like, hey, what do they need to hear? What can I share with someone that might help them that I've experienced? And all of a sudden it like just feels different, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Now you're taking that consultative approach, right? It's less about, you being up there and then all eyes on you. It's more about, them. How can I help? Absolutely. Doesn't take all the nerves away, but yeah, I think that definitely, that approach definitely helps for sure.
Well, I appreciate you being on the show. This has meant a lot to me. I love you so much. And also a shout out. You mentioned your wife is a doctor. And so of course, shout out to anyone working in healthcare during this time. I know it's been a really challenging time, but listen, you're doing great, man. I appreciate you coming on the show and just sharing like this perspective. This has been a very big mile marker for me. So I really appreciate you, man.
Yeah, of course. Happy to be on, and looking forward to being back on the 100, 500, 1000 reunion show. Feel free to invite me back. Happy to be on anytime.
You got it, man. Hey, I'll see you later, man. Can't wait to share this.
All right, sounds good. Appreciate it.